There really is just something like inherently awkward about filming because I'm like talking at an inanimate object while sitting in an empty room by myself, knowing that people, like real people, are gonna be seeing this. This is, all right, whatever, let's get started. Right, so I applied to the 2025 to 2026 PhD cycle, and I've been lucky enough to be accepted into 3 programs. I got accepted into the CUNY Graduate Center here in New York City. I was also accepted to the University of Pittsburgh, and I was accepted to the University of California, Los Angeles. I have been invited to go to Pittsburgh for a prospective visit. So I am flying out to Pittsburgh tomorrow morning. They took care of the entire process for me. They took care of, you know, my flights, my hotels, transportation, and they even set up meetings with current students so that I can meet them on Zoom tonight before I have to fly out and see everyone in person tomorrow. So that's been super nice because I feel like it's taken a lot of the weight off my shoulders and I can just focus on actually visiting the school and seeing if I can see myself living there for the next 5 or 6 years as I go through the program. So here I am at LaGuardia and I'm like super feeling the rush because traffic threw me off and I ended up running later than I expected. I really wanted to grab that coffee, but as you can see, I'm running because I was later than I expected to be. So I'm like super rushing. Honestly though, there's something about airports that makes everything feel like a blur. Yet I ended up recording the most random things, like me walking with my suitcase as I, I'm trying to make it to the gate. I don't know, maybe it's just like a strange mix of excitement and anxiety that comes with the journey. I genuinely do not know how I made it to the gate on time, but I did. Here we are. I really wish I picked up that coffee because I was exhausted, but it's too late because we're about to board in a couple minutes and I am out of time. There is something so calming about seeing that plane lined up on that runway because you made it and you know that you're about to board and you're about to roll forward, and then you can breathe a sigh of relief because that weight has been lifted off your shoulders because you did not miss your flight. That flight was so quick. I think it only took about an hour or so. But here we are. We made it. We are at the Pittsburgh International Airport. It feels a little surreal to be here because I'm not just here for vacation. I am here to figure out if I want to live here for the next 5 years as I do my PhD. So after we deboard the plane, I walk down this super long hallway and I am trying to figure out how to get to baggage claim and exit this airport. It's honestly kind of funny how confused I am because this airport was a lot smaller than I was expecting it to be. And despite the fact that I thought this was a smaller airport, and I stand by that, especially since I come from New York, surprise, surprise, when I went down these escalators, I found out that you didn't just exit the airport, you had to take a tram first. So not only did I have to take the first set of escalators, I had to take a second before I even hit the tram. And I was so not expecting that. I thought I was just gonna come down these escalators and leave, but no, there was a whole process. I really thought that Pittsburgh International Airport was a small little airport and I could just waltz out over to baggage claim and leave, but here we are going through this whole process. It's always a little disorienting when you're thrown off like that, but at least I'm getting a little extra adventure right off the bat, right? I always think of airports as these like sort of in-between spaces, which at that moment when I was waiting for the tram felt kind of fitting because I was trying to decide the fate of my future. Well, one way or another, I somehow made it out of that labyrinth of an airport and met up with the taxi service that Pitt had provided me. I was expecting the journey from the airport to the city to be a lot more eventful, probably because I'm from the concrete jungle, but there was a lot more open space than I was expecting, which in hindsight, I guess is nice because it's not as anxiety inducing, right? So I literally filmed nothing that first day after I made it to my hotel because they weren't kidding when they said they were going to pack my schedule full. I literally had meeting after meeting after meeting, and I got to meet almost all of the faculty there on that first day, and I was able to meet quite a few of the graduate students, not only from the classics PhD, but also from philosophy. They were literally so nice to me because let me tell you, they paid for all my meals, including all my random coffees and stuff. This is when I was at breakfast at a small diner the next day, and this is literally the only thing I had to pay for the entire time I was there. They really were not joking when they said they wanted me to go over there so that they could sway my decision so I would choose their school. I am not going to lie. I felt like I was being wooed, except this time I was being wooed by a grad school and not a mediocre guy that was not going to text me back. And then after breakfast, I had like an hour or so to sort of wander around town on my own. And then after that, I was still pretty packed. I had back to back meetings, not only with a couple more classics professors, but also some people from the history department. And then I was already on a flight back home. So, after that entire visit of seeing the school and seeing the city, what do I think? Okay, so it's been a couple days since Pittsburgh. Let's talk about it. First things first, let's talk about the city. So I really liked that Pittsburgh felt very much like a small town while you get all the benefits of a city. What do I mean by that? It was really laid back and chill in a way that the cities I'm used to living in, New York, or even Philadelphia, or even cities I've visited a lot, like Tokyo or Hong Kong or London, they have this really like hustle and bustle culture. Everything's really fast paced, everything's go, go, go. Pittsburgh did not have that same feeling. It felt incredibly laid back. The people there were a lot more open to like everyday smaller interactions, like small talk. This is not something I'm used to in bigger cities. It's usually something I feel more when I'm visiting not giant metropolitans. In that way, it felt a lot more friendly and it felt a lot more personable. So that was really nice. But at the same time, I still felt like I got all the benefits of being in a big city, like how readily accessible everything was, how walkable it was. It definitely did not feel like I needed a car, which would take a lot of stress off my shoulders. Just for like everyday living, the stress of driving, finding parking, fighting for a spot. I wouldn't have to worry about any of that because it felt like I could live without it. I was warned, however, that Pittsburgh does not have a lot of restaurants to choose from. Now, what did they mean by that? Because clearly when I was walking around Pittsburgh and around the area near campus, there were plenty of restaurants. From what I could gather and from what I could understand from the people telling me that there weren't that many restaurants, I think is just there aren't as many restaurants to choose from that aren't either major chains or typical American food. So I think if you were someone that wanted to try authentic Indian food or maybe authentic Nepalese food, I don't know, just from what I could understand from my talks with these people, there just aren't as many options. Obviously, as someone who was raised Asian American, having access to, these Asian markets and being able to buy these groceries is something that matters a lot to me. This is what I eat day to day. It would certainly make it a little bit more difficult because I don't think there's a lot of Asian supermarkets there. From what I could see and from what I could, pull together on Yelp, there doesn't seem to be an equivalent of an H Mart or a 99 Ranch there, which would make life a lot more difficult. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a giant Asian population. There are definitely some. I want to make that very clear. There's, plenty of international students that I saw walking around that, were living there and had access to like really fun bubble tea. There were a ton of bubble tea shops near and around campus. So it's not like there aren't options. It would just be something that I would have to, I think about a little bit more every day. On the other hand, I learned that the founder of Duolingo comes from Pittsburgh, apparently. Duolingo is founded by a former Carnegie Mellon professor who decided one day to create a language learning model that has since grown to a huge international learning language app that regularly has an owl thirsting over Dua Lipa on Twitter. Honestly, iconic. That is a huge bonus. The school itself is really pretty. The architecture on the outside seems relatively unassuming, but when you walk inside, it is gorgeous. Apparently, when I was talking to one of the professors, the University of Pittsburgh was voted one of the top schools in the US that looks like Hogwarts. And honestly, as someone who's studying classics, that's the type of environment, that's the energy I want to be in. I want to be reading Latin while looking like I'm in the middle of Hogwarts. I want to be... This is what I want with my life. I want to be sitting in the Cathedral of Learning, which is the main school building. I want to be sitting there in one of those beautiful rooms. I want it to be incredibly ornately decorated, and I want to be stressing over ancient Greek in that environment because honestly, I feel like it adds to your, learning experience. And honestly, if I decided to go there when I become a TA, that's how I want to teach Latin to my students. I want to ask if I could teach in one of those super elaborate rooms. And I want to be like, hey, we're gonna learn about the first declension. So yeah, it's an incredibly beautiful school. There's this really weird, but I think really fun mix between modern and also older architecture, which is amazing because you can have the main library building decked out in full glass, which is super modern and futuristic looking, right next to one of the buildings there, which is apparently using the floor plan of one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. As opposed to recreate that, apparently they found the floor plans for that and they're like, we're gonna make one of our buildings look like that. I think it's supposed to be the Temple of Halicarnassus, but I'm not positive. Also, they have like columns everywhere. Not accurate, but I do appreciate that they tried. And lastly, I think we should talk about the department. First of all, everyone is super nice. The department is unique in the fact that it's relatively young. Most of the professors have only been there for 4 or 5-ish years. And because they're all similar in age, and also not that far off in age from me, there's really a sense of camaraderie amongst them. They're all clearly, learning together, building research together. It feels incredibly collaborative is what I want to say. So the reason that all the faculty are relatively young and new to the city and to the university is because apparently there was a huge overhaul not that long ago. And during that overhaul, a lot was happening, and near and around that time, the grad program for classics was canceled. This does mean that if I were to come in, I would be the 2nd cohort ever for this new rebirth for the classics PhD program. It's simultaneously exciting and scary because this means that they are still trying to figure out things. But on the other hand, it means that I would be able to really tailor the program to what I would want. There would be a lot more flexibility as to how and what I would want my program to look like. And because all of the faculty are so new and so willing to test things out, they would be more than willing to help me sort of through that process. It's also exciting because they, as a department, and especially the chair of the department, they seem incredibly motivated and charged to really sort of build a new sort of classics department. They shared that they had a lot of ideas as to how to, modernize classics, which is something that's incredibly exciting because it's something that a lot of people in the field talk about, that our field seems really old and out of touch, and what can we do to sort of bridge that gap. But it seems like this department in particular has an idea as to what that looks like, and they're trying their best to sort of build that, which is incredibly exciting because it means they have a lot of new and fresh ideas. They're a lot more willing to take risks with the type of research that you would be able to do, especially since they're not only trying to do that with the students they have now, but they're trying to build a program that will specifically allow for those types of ideas to come through. It's also incredibly unique in the fact that it is a female-dominated department. Most of the faculty there are women, which is, especially for a field like classics, which has for the longest time been and has had the reputation of being an all-boys club. This is incredibly exciting. This means that, you know, not only are they trying new types of research, it also means that they have a lot of new different points of view. A common story that most people like to bring up as to why it's important to include different points of view is that a bunch of historians were arguing whether or not women in ancient Rome wore wigs because of how elaborate the hairstyles were. And then one day this hairdresser came in to a museum, took one look at it, and was like, no, you can definitely do that. And went home and was able to figure out that you could do these incredibly elaborate hairstyles using your natural hair with nothing but thread and a needle. So they're really putting into practice what they're preaching, which is incredibly exciting. This is what we want to see, especially with research like mine, which is not the most traditional in sense, and this means that they would encourage me. So, do I see myself attending the University of Pittsburgh? If it were only limited to the department, absolutely, without a question. They are so nice. I love how, you know, they really encourage more new age research. I really like how they all really seem like they're genuinely friends with each other, and that's something that's really important. However, I still need to carefully consider the other two options, which I'll be sharing with you guys before I make that decision. As we are done touring all three schools, we're going to talk carefully about the pros and cons, and obviously you guys will be here and I will let you know which one I end up choosing. So thank you for coming to my first video diary. This was super nice of the University of Pittsburgh to not only fly me out and to pay for my hotel, my transportation, but to organize such a thorough and comprehensive tour of both the school and the city. So thank you, Pittsburgh. That's so kind of you. Anyways, thank you for coming to my first video diary. Bye!